I love doing these episodes when we have special guests. Andrew, I know you're technically a guest here, but I see you often enough. You don't count. Dan Robertson is here and is live, well, quote unquote, live from Columbus. And be mindful, he's doing this on his phone. So, hopefully there's no feed problems, but also be mindful of any celebrity cameos that come behind. Before we were doing this, Pierre Hood came up at one point.
So, hey, everybody, it's Pierre Hood. There he is.
Yeah. Hey, get you recorded. Salut.
There you go.
Dan, who's better, you or Pierre Hood?
How do you think I'm going to answer that, Julian? Pierre Hood, of course. If I said me, I would be roasted. I'd be lying as well.
Okay, well, at the very least, you're honest. Let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens on Hockey Inside Out. I'm Julian McKenzie, alongside this week's set of panelists. Rick Green, Stanley Cup champion. He's the only regular that's on this week. Andrew Berkshire, who occasionally writes for the Montreal Gazette and also hosts the Game Over show with the SDPN network. Hi, again. And of course, Dan Robertson, your voice of the Montreal Canadiens, tapping in special guest. Dan, thank you so much for doing this, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to hang out with us.
Oh, my pleasure. If my phone starts to get a little shaky, my tripod is my left arm, so we'll see how that works out. But it's fun being on with you guys.
Hey, I appreciate that. And hey, the workout that your arm will be getting off of this, it will be worth it. I promise you. Let's look back at the Montreal Canadiens' last game against the Winnipeg Jets. So depending on when this comes out, we're going to go off that game here. They did lose to the Winnipeg Jets on the Monday. The Jets are still trying to just recoup whatever faint playoff hopes they had. They needed that game a little bit more than the Montreal Canadiens. But Samuel Montembeault, he didn't necessarily look all that bad in that game. He actually hasn't looked all that bad pretty much since the new year. He started off pretty rough, had a save percentage, I think, under 890. It's been a little over 900 since. Rick, I'd like to start with you, even though we are talking about a goaltender and not a defenseman. What were your takeaways of Sam Montembeault's performance against the Winnipeg Jets earlier this week, and just his first half of his second half of the year so far?
Well, I think, I think you have to give him full credit for, how he's responded. Like we touched on before, the kid had a tough time when he first got his opportunity to play. He was in, he got pulled, he was in, he got pulled. So he was kind of, confused as far as, how long am I going to play in this game? But I think he's responded really well and taken full advantage of his opportunity. You look at the game against Winnipeg, he made some great saves, timely saves to give his team a chance to win. The big question mark is he's, played 59 games in the NHL, 25 years old. What kind of consistency are we going to see with this guy moving forward? And is he able to play and make the key saves that he did from, previous games? And that's a big challenge. We all know that goaltending is one of the toughest positions, and you're as good as your last save. And, I think he's a really nice kid. He's well-liked. And, he wants it bad. So hopefully he's going to progress in a good way and allow him a chance to develop and, get a chance to be a player in the NHL.
Dan, what do you think?
Well, he made at least 4, if not 5, brilliant saves going from right to left. And so that was probably, the savior for the Canadiens, the reason they didn't lose 7-2. Instead of 4-2. I like the way he's improved this year. I mean, when he first showed up, rebound control was a problem. He talked about how Eric Ramon, the goalie coach, has taught him to be not to go so far out of his crease, just to kind of back up a little bit, and it's helped him with tip shots and that sort of thing. I would like to have had seen more of him down the stretch. They kept going with Jake Allen, and obviously that gave them the best chance to win, but I thought maybe it would be fun to see them go one in, one out sort of thing. And now with Allen hurt, we'll see more of him, and it all depends how much, or if and when Carey Price comes back, how much more we'll see of Sam. But I think overall it's a good story, right? This guy, what is he, the third or arguably fourth string goaltender coming into the season when we were wondering what would happen with Primo. But I think he's a lot better now than his first 5 or 6 games. So it's been a lot of progress for Sam Montembeault this year, I think.
Yeah, it's been a really strong stretch for him. And I think people forget that when he was playing in January, he was playing injured. I think into February as well, right before Ducharme was dismissed. Sam Montembeault was not 100%. You know, they had Caden Primo starting games, even though he had no confidence whatsoever. Even Michael McNiven getting into a game where he was injured as well. The Canadiens were down to one healthy goaltender, and that goalie had no confidence. So Montembeault's had a rough go this year. It's not like the Canadiens are great defensively. And I thought the Jets game might have been one of his best games this year. I know he's pretty excellent games, but just the economy of movement that he showed in that game was really astounding considering where he was at the start of the year. There has been an ascension, but as Rick mentioned, the consistency is not there. So what are you looking at? Are you looking at a guy who at 25, 26 years old has the potential to be a starting goaltender? Probably not, but he's a guy who could be a backup. He could be a backup here or on another team. Maybe even if he gets really great development over the next year or so, he could be like a 1B. But as a potential replacement for Allen or Price, I think it's not in the cards.
So you don't feel – so imagine you're Kent Hughes for a second, and you're considering the goaltending options that you have, because you'll have Carey Price, obviously, depending on whatever games he gets in this year. You'll just have the contract, and you'd have Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault. Like, what's the future for Montembeault? Do you keep him over Allen? Do you say, you know what, man, like, just let him go somewhere else, try to see what piece you can get for him? Like, what's the future for Montembeault, this organization, in your eyes, if it were up to you? And then we can throw that out to everyone else as well.
Yeah, I think that just highly depends on what they plan on doing with Price, right? Like, if Price comes back and he's 80% of what he was in the playoffs last year for the next couple of years, the Canadiens are probably just going to keep him around and play out the rest of that contract and hope that he can maintain that level when they are able to boost this team back into competitive territory, hopefully within the rest of that contract. But if Price comes back and decides, well, you know what, I came back, but I can't really play up to my standard, I'm going to retire, or he comes back and decides he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild and they have to figure out a way to move him, then you can't really move Sam Montembeault because nobody else in the organization has proved they can play in the NHL. You know, and Jake Allen is a guy that I thought that they were going to try to trade him at the trade deadline just because I think that you could get a king's ransom for him with how he's played this year and also the leadership that he provides. But if Carey Price can't go, I think Jake Allen is almost like, I know goalies can't be captains, but he's almost the captain of the team. Like, he's provided so much confidence and calm stability throughout the season when he's been in the lineup. I don't know if you can move that right away.
Dan, what do you think of that?
Well, like Andrew said, so much, and we all know this, so much depends on Carey Price. So much of everything depends on Carey Price and his status and if he's back and that sort of thing. I think Sam has proven that, you know, he's more ready for the National Hockey League right now than Caden Primo is. So if Price isn't ready to go, it would, like, is he a good number 2 goaltender on a contending team? That remains to be seen. I would say right now, probably not. But I think it's all about where the chips fall for him. But as I mentioned earlier, I think we all think this. It's been nice to see him at least prove himself to some degree, that he can get in there and play well enough. And Andrew made a good point too. He's still wearing a brace on his right hand. Montembeault, not Andrew. Andrew might be, I don't know. But that's the injury that's plagued him all year long. So there were times where he was fighting through a lot, seemingly like everybody else on the roster. But, you know, it's just that trickle-down effect from Price going into next year. It's unmistakable, and we'll see where they go from there.
I mean, with 9 games left, I would love to see this kid get every opportunity to play as many games as possible. And obviously, you know, you can't judge the potential of a goalie in such a short period of time, but you can get a real good idea on, you know, how he handles himself. And you know, he's young as far as, you know, experience goes. So let's see what the kid can do, and you know, add things up at the end of his games played, and you know, see if they can fit him in if he's deserving.
Okay. All right. Some pretty good observations on the state of the goal. Actually, you know what? I have one final question with regards to goaltending. And I know I'm just kind of freewheeling a little bit. It's not something I specifically asked in the questions, but it's something that comes to mind. So we know Carey Price doing everything that he can to put himself back in the lineup, right? With the amount of games that are left between now and the end of this month, It's a great story, I think, for him to come back and put himself in a position where he can be back. But is whatever games he's going to get, is that going to tell us enough about whether or not he's healthy and truly ready to play? And if the Canadiens somehow want to move on from him with his blessing, is that going to be able to tell us enough that, you know, he's worth taking a chance on if you're an opposing GM and you're thinking of acquiring goaltending? And of course, if Carey Price weighs that NMC.
I don't know if it tells everyone enough. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
go for that, Dan. Go for that.
Go for that, Dan.
Nope. Okay, sorry. I would say it's not. So if it's 9 games left and he plays 4 of them, if you're an opposing GM on another team, you say, well, okay, he played those 4 games, didn't show any ill effects, he's not hurt, I'm going to go get him. I mean, it's all they have left, obviously, so there can't be a bigger sample size, but I don't think it's enough to prove anything health-wise for Price.
Okay. What about you, Andrew?
The person that he's going to be able to prove something to is himself.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what it comes down to. I know that Carey Price is so heavily valued around the league as a player and a person. So if he says, all right, I'm good, I'm 100% healthy, I can play, then maybe there's some level of value for him across the league. But in terms of what we can evaluate as fans or media, not much. Like if he comes in and gets lit up, we don't know if that means that he's going to get lit up next year or if he's done. It could be that the Canadiens' defense is bad and he hasn't played in almost a year.
And the defense is not they've parted with a bunch of pieces ahead of the trade deadline, and Justin Barron isn't even going to be available to play for them. The defense right now is a big question mark.
And and that being said, with such few games left, like Dan touched on too, I mean, I don't think you give a real fair evaluation of where Price is health-wise and conditioning wise in such a short term. So this year, basically for him, to me, I see it as being kind of written off for him. So it would be too tough a decision to come down to such a short period of time and saying that he's ready to go, he's not ready to go. So it's going to be interesting, as the time moves forward here to see where Carey Price is and what's he all about. Interesting summer.
Okay, and now that concludes our State of the Union when it comes to goaltending with the Montreal Canadiens. Any other thoughts on the game they had before Monday against the Toronto Maple Leafs? It seems as if they've had some pretty interesting and entertaining games throughout the season. Even though the Toronto Maple Leafs are supposed to be this playoff team, this is supposed to be the best Leafs team they've ever had. Austin Matthews has 51-50, and everyone's losing their minds over whether that's official or not official or not. The Canadiens still hung in close against them on Saturday, and Martin St. Louis had a chance to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs for like a third time as head coach in such a short time as interim head coach. But alas, it did not happen. Any thoughts? We'll start with you, Dan, on that Canadiens loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs over the weekend.
Well, I thought when Matthews scored his second goal on Montembeault's first shot against that it might get away from them. And I like the way the Canadiens fought back after that. And I like the way Montembeault played as well. So for whatever reason, I mean, the Canadiens didn't have the Leafs number this year. The last time they played, they outshot Montreal, I think 51-18 or 19, and the Canadiens still won. But I do like what we saw from the Canadiens because we've seen that a lot from them this year, right? We think they shouldn't be able to get back into a game. They're down 3-0, 3-1, whatever. But they're able to fight back, and I think that's been a hallmark, albeit in a short time frame of what Martin St. Louis' team is doing for him so far this year.
I'm with Dan on that. I think that the Canadiens kept with it, even though it looked like they weren't going to after that Matthews goal. And Montembeault maybe shouldn't have allowed the first goal. Is a little bit weak, but it's still Austin Matthews, and he rallied after that. If Jake Allen does not get injured in that game, I do wonder how it changes because he was so good in that first period. But the Canadiens keep on fighting back. I think that dynamic combo of Suzuki Caulfield gives them something to truly build around up front that they haven't had in a very long time.
And, like we've said, since the changing of the coaches, they've been competitive each and every game, even though they give up 40 shots. Against Toronto, they kept coming at Toronto, and they tried their very best to beat them. But you got to give full marks to Toronto, as much as I don't want to. They're impressive to watch with Matthews on the ice and Marner. These guys, they put on a real clinic when it comes to cycling that puck around and doing whatever they want to do. Not to mention their power play, it's like going, oh my goodness. I'd be like going, now what do I do? But compliments to the Canadiens, compliments to the mindset. They're going at each and every game, each and every team, doesn't matter what, from start to finish, they're going to do their best. And, that's all you can ask for as a coach. And that's what he's getting from him right now.
Okay. Also, I'll just end with this. Matthews getting 51 goals in 50 games. Are we considering that official? Are we getting tripped up on that sort of stuff? Where do you guys stand on that?
It should be considered official. I hate the argument that it only counts from the beginning of the season. If anything, it's harder to do it mid-season because defenses are a bit more scrambly at the beginning of the year. The only reason we talk about it being from the beginning of the season in the first 50 games is because when Maurice Richard did it, there were only 50 games, right? So, pressure's on to do it back then, but he still scored 51 and 50. Okay. I don't care if it's official or not. He did it.
That's a way of looking at things, Dan.
No, Andrew's right. And look, there's a lot of Matthews haters, and that's fine. But don't let it cloud the fact that he's a brilliant player. I mean, you get 51 goals in the span of 50 games if it goes from one year into the next or whatever. I mean, we're splitting hairs here. I think it's kind of ridiculous. What he has done is pretty special.
Rick, you get last word.
Love to watch the guy. What a talent. Every time he's on the ice, huge threat. And my goodness, can he shoot the puck? I think he was clocked at 140 some kilometers an hour, one of his shots. I mean, those kind of guys don't come around very often, but he's a real deal. And, good for him. It's nice to see him, being part of the NHL and make the game better.
Yeah, I'll just jump in with this. Not answer that question.
I'll jump in with this if I can. I think he has the best left shot of anybody in history. Maybe Bobby Hull. I know it's a different era, but you look at all the great shooters, the Bosses, the Ovechkins, Brett Hull, all right shots. So if anybody can think of a better left shot, I'm listening. That
is a very big take, and I'm going to have to stop you all there before this podcast turns into Leafs Corner. People don't like that. People don't like that. Hey, you guys remember when the trade deadline was coming up and people were wondering about Jeff Petry's future with the Montreal Canadiens and the fact that his family is no longer in Montreal? They've gone back to the States. He's still on this team. He seems to be a little bit more favorable of this current regime than the previous one, but he still is a question mark when it comes to this coming off season with regards to the contract that he's on, whether or not he wants to stick out with whatever the Canadiens are going to do with the construction of this team. And considering the fact we still live in the age of COVID and restrictions, maybe he just wants to be closer to his family. Andrew, I'll start with you with this. Do you think the Canadiens are going to have to move on from Jeff Petry just so he isn't a distraction for next season? What do you make of this entire affair?
I mean, I'm no insider, right? I don't get to talk to the players every day like Dan does, but my gathering of this whole situation is that while Jeff Petry did not get along with the coaching staff very well and seemed to be happy to call them out at certain points during the season, he didn't seem to be to the point of toxic to the players in the room. He's still considered a leader on that team, and he does seem happier now.
Yes.
Should he be reunited with his family during the regular season? Sure. If, the pandemic is over next year, which who knows, it's year 2 now, going into year 3, seems like it's never going to end. Maybe his family comes back to Montreal and it's a situation that doesn't need to be resolved. But I think the writing is on the wall here that once you go down that road of talking about a trade, I think it's hard to walk that back. Vlad Tarasenko notwithstanding, I think he'll be moved in the offseason. I just don't think they have to do it. I don't think the Hughes and Gorton administration is actually under that much pressure. With most of their players who are signed with term, they can kind of build them up and trade them when they need to, because they don't necessarily need to be good next season. They just need to be doing what they're doing now, which is be competitive every night. Avoid what happened at the end of the Ducharme time there, where it was not an NHL team. They were not competing in a way that an NHL team has to compete. And when you're having people pay for games, that you can't be losing 7-1 every game.
And I think, no matter who the player is, any player that has to be traded, I think that, ultimately you're going to have to move that out of the dressing room. You don't want to have any negativity not to say that he's that type of person, but the mindset is he is fixed in his mind that he'd like to move somewhere else. Everybody else knows that, and I think it would be in the best interest of the whole group, himself and the whole group, for him to change locations. Easier said than done, making that kind of money that he's making, but I don't think it's a healthy situation to have a guy that has publicly said, you know, I don't really want to be part of this this organization anymore. So you got to find as management a way to accommodate him and you know, turn the page. And, you know, try and make your team better by moving them out.
It's an interesting situation. I should say, when we checked into the hotel, I'm in Columbus right now on Tuesday. You know, the players go in first, we come in afterward, and Jeff's wife and his boys were there. So it's the first time they saw each other since the All-Star break. So it was a pretty nice moment, and it kind of, you know, puts a human touch to it. So having said that, I expect that he'll play well in Columbus tonight, because it's, when you don't see your family for a long time and you finally do, it's a pretty good thing. I don't think any of us think that Jeff Petry's a malcontent. He's a pretty quiet guy. So I don't think if he were here next year, it would be a distraction. But I think the fact that already Jeff Gorton's been honest about it. I'm sorry, Kent Hughes has been honest about it. They both have, that they're going to trade him if they can find the right return. I think it's going to happen. Now, what that return would be, obviously it would have been better if after the coaching change, Jeff had played really well. That hasn't happened. Injury's been a part of it too. I guess it's up to other GMs to try to figure out what he has left in the tank, but I don't think he'll be here when training camp starts in September.
Okay, that's some pretty interesting. Look at that, the insight on Jeff Petry getting to be with his family. That's actually really nice. Thank you for that, because that's really nice.
The boys, you know, I guess it's 3 boys. It's just so funny. They're just running around like mad kids, you know, and Dad's here, and then one of them got distracted and ran over to the other side of the hotel, and it's just reminded me of being a parent of a couple of young kids, but it really was sweet.
Oh, geez. I think everyone here, aside from me, is a parent of a couple of young kids, actually. So I don't know that feeling, but I imagine it is very nice. Anyway, let's get to the final question of Hockey Inside Out for this week. It's time to talk about who could be the captain of this Montreal Canadiens team. Seen a lot of people drum up support for Joel Edmundson in recent weeks. A lot of people are already looking to the future and thinking, hey, is Nick Suzuki already captain material? Rick, who do you think should be the next captain of the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, with no surprise, you know, you got to go with the smart guys on the team in a defenseman, Joel Edmundson.
No surprise.
You know, to me, he strikes me as a silent leader. You know, a guy that's well respected, a guy that sticks up for his group, good with the guys on and off the ice, and you know, he's a guy that shows up each and every night and does his thing. He's not really noticed that much, but you notice him when he's not in the lineup. And I think that he kind of reminds me, like Bob Gainey was. He was a quiet leader. He didn't say too much. He showed through example. When push came to shove, he would step in and, you know, make his 2 cents worth known. And Joel Edmundson, I think, would be my pick as a kind of guy to fill that void right now.
Okay, Dan, your pick.
I'm going to say Nick Suzuki, and I think Edmundson right now is kind of the de facto captain. He does a lot of little things. When Jordan Harris joined the team in Florida, he and Christian Dvorak took him for sushi. I know that doesn't mean you should have a C pasted on your jersey right away, but you get the point. He's very important in the room, and I know that before he came back this season, Don Ducharme was saying 2 players. He said, we really miss Byron, and we really miss Edmundson, not just for his play on the ice, but his work in the room. The only reason I wouldn't say Edmundson, I don't know how much longer he'll be here. Does he have 2 years after this on his contract? Okay. So Nick has 8 years after this on his contract, right? So I think if Edmundson leaves after 2 years, I think it would be Suzuki then. So I think the only reason I'm hesitant to say Suzuki is new big contract and the captaincy, a lot of pressure on a kid, but I think he could handle it. So I think it will be Nick Suzuki.
There's only one person who could fill this role in the Montreal Canadiens, Mike Hoffman. No, I'm kidding. It's Nick Suzuki.
That would be no way. You don't even like Mike Hoffman that much.
No, I'm kidding. It's going to be Nick Suzuki. I think Dan hit the nail on the head that he signed for 8 more years. And yeah, it's a lot of pressure on the kid, but also you look at what the pressure that's already on him, right? He's one of the only players in the entire NHL who's the coach's first choice at even strength, first choice in the power play, first choice in the PK, first choice in overtime, first choice in the shootout. No matter what the situation is, the coach is tapping Nick Suzuki on the back and saying, let's go, kid. So putting a C on him, it doesn't really matter that much, I don't think. And Joel Edmundson doesn't necessarily need the C to continue to be a leader. I think it's just getting Suzuki into that role now so that he can grow into that role when the team becomes competitive. I think that's what's important. And Joel Edmundson can be part of how Suzuki grows into that leadership role. But I think Joel Edmundson, 2 years left, he might not play that final year in Montreal either. He's a guy that they can probably get a lot for when they put him on the trade market, because eventually even the players who are signed to term with the Montreal Canadiens who are on like the back half of their career are going to be moved out as the team goes to more of a youth movement.
If they make Nick Suzuki captain and Joel Edmundson is still on the team, does that mean Nick Suzuki picks the music after games as opposed to what happens now, where it's Joel Edmundson who's in charge of that?
I don't know, because wasn't it even when Pacioretty was captain, wasn't Subban picking the tunes back in the day? So maybe that's a fight.
I don't know. I think even at one point, I forget who said it. I think maybe it was last year, or at some point there was a point where Edmundson wasn't there and Nick Suzuki was in fact picking the music at one point. I forget who says that, but I'll say this for Joel Edmundson, in all seriousness, it would make sense to have him as a stopgap captain, just as a transitional guy getting to Nick Suzuki. I don't necessarily think he needs all that added pressure going into a new contract for next season. He already has the situation he has being at center, essentially being the 1C and not having other guys insulate him. But he is trying his best to adapt to the new defensive assignments, and he's having himself a really good year, and everyone's expecting him to be better. So I think you could still make it a little easier on him by not giving him the C right away. And I just think it makes sense to give a guy like Joel Edmundson, the captain, a guy who a lot of people but a lot of people just respected almost from the get-go since he joined the organization. And even the fact that what impresses me the most about him is the fact he was not around this team for months and people just revered him as much as they did. That just goes to show what he means to that locker room. It makes sense to me that he should be captain, even if it is just for a short while. And maybe he knows that too, considering what Nick Suzuki can bring to the organization. But it makes sense to me that Joel Edmundson could be considered captain.
Well, here's a dark horse candidate, and I'll throw this to Dan because he knows more than us about the day-to-day, but I think there's a big perception among the fans that Josh Anderson is a really big leader in that room and trying to lead by example, but I think the consistency offensively isn't there for him, but at the same time, he's one of the only guys who really brought it in the first half of the season. Is Josh Anderson possibly a dark horse candidate?
Maybe a dark horse, but you bring up a good point, and I'd like to know what Rick thinks about this, to be honest. Does a player have to have a certain amount of production to be a captain? You mentioned, like, Anderson the last while with nothing to play for. I don't know if he's playing hurt, but the production hasn't been there. Edmundson, obviously, I mean, he's not going to be a guy. He produces in his own way defensively, but does that make sense, Rick? Like, do you need your captain to be a guy who, not necessarily a top scorer, but I mean, on the ice, that they have to be there and playing well every night, whether it's a forward or a defenseman?
No, I don't believe so. I think it's all about the personality, and there's some individuals. Pacioretty comes to mind that really didn't fit that captaincy role, and it actually, I think, took away from his overall game at that time. But I don't think the stats or any of that stuff really plays out, other than what kind of person is he? Does he really, does he really fit that role of being a captain and spokesman and, taking care of business on and off the ice? And I think that's the bottom line, to have a good one. I've played with a number of guys that, haven't necessarily lit up the lamp offensively, but ones that just fit that mold and do a good job at it, and everybody rallies around them.
Okay. Really quickly, Brendan Gallagher, remember, like, there was a time when a lot of people thought, man, he makes sense for him to be captain. A lot of that talk about Brendan Gallagher has like quieted in the last how many months. Even Stu Cowan, who sings the praises of Brendan Gallagher almost every chance he gets on this show, even he changed his mind in recent weeks about him being captain of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I like Gallagher. I think he's an on-ice guy that you want to have in your leadership core, and definitely plays for the crest. But I don't know if I don't see him as captain. I know I talked to Tim Peel because the perception is that refs don't respect Gallagher. He gave me the opposite impression of that. He seems to be a huge fan of Brendan Gallagher. But then I believe it was Dave Jackson said that refs don't respect Gallagher. So maybe it's not unanimous there. And I think you do have to have some level of respect from the officials. And, you know, Gallagher's actually done a good job drawing penalties this year for the first time in a long while. But whether we expect that to continue is another story. He definitely doesn't get the benefit of the doubt on any goal call.
Okay, Dan, and then we'll let Rick finish.
Yeah, it looks like that window is closed, and I don't know if it's because of his effectiveness anymore. I guess apart from that, I want to see what Gallagher can do next year, because he had such a short offseason. They all did, right? But I think he needs a long offseason to prepare his body for battle, maybe more than some guys, if that makes any sense, just the way he plays. So I think the first month of next year is going to be pretty telltale about where he is as a player. But yeah, it's funny. It's like his name has kind of left the conversation, I think, as a possible captain for Montreal. But he's still a leader, obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say leader through example. And he does a lot of, talking to the media to represent what's really going on in the dressing room. But I think that he's not the kind of guy that he's the kind of guy that shows the character that you want to associate with the Montreal Canadiens each and every night. But I don't. My feeling is not really the captain when you have some other guys in front of him.
Damn, there goes there was a time when people thought Brendan Gallagher captain material for the Montreal Canadiens. How things have changed over the course of how many months. But someday soon we'll know who the new captain of the Montreal Canadiens will be. Dan, can't thank you enough for tapping in. I can't thank you enough, Andrew, as well, for tapping in as well. And Rick, I mean, dude, you're just the consummate professional, consistent as always. Appreciate seeing your face as well. And I appreciate everyone who was able to tune in and watch this podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to our show on YouTube. Click on the subscribe button on this YouTube page. You're already here. You might as well do it. And visit hockeyinsideout.com for more episodes, and subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter, montrealgazette.com/newsletters. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode.